Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where Hollywood might not be releasing any big movies right now, but they're certainly getting ready to make some more, with a slew of casting announcements to discuss today. The first being very good news for Riz Ahmed, because it means one less competitor for that mystery Venom role opposite Tom Hardy. And that's Pedro Pascal, who has landed himself another gig playing the villain in the Equalizer 2. Big break for Pascal, but also a big departure, because we're talking about someone who so far has exclusively played heroes. Well, he was an anti-hero to some degree on Game of Thrones, but on Narcos, The Great Wall, and even the upcoming Kingsman 2, although who knows, there could always be a twist in there, but so far he's always been a good guy. But here, he'll go to the dark side, and of course he'll be starring opposite, well, we'll see. I don't really know if you could use starring for anybody else in the Equalizer movie sequel, considering the fact that the first one was really the Denzel show. And what a great show it was! It was Denzel Washington in front of the camera and Anton Fuqua behind it, and it was a big hit for both of them. It gave both of them a second wind, a lot of capital to spend, and as you might recall, they spent that capital on The Magnificent Seven, and they're broke again. So I think that might be one of the reasons that the Equalizer 2 has become such a top priority. So much so that Antoine Fuqua has turned down other opportunities. I think it was the Scarface film that David Ayer just got kicked off of to make the Equalizer 2, and it has a set release date of September 14th, 2018. Now, Fuqua can do a good villain with Ayer consequentially for Training Day, of course, and that villain was Denzel, won him an Oscar. But the interesting thing is that will Denzel truly let someone go toe-to-toe with him these days? He hasn't really challenged himself in quite some time. I mean, with all due respect to Ethan Hawke, even Training Day was the Denzel Washington show. But I think it would be very satisfying to see him, really let himself have somebody. I mean, Viola Davis was fabulous with him in Fences, obviously. An Oscar winner herself in that specific role. But still, I think for the most part, that was the Denzel show as well. So it would be nice to see Denzel maybe not be in a one-man show and let Pedro Pascal really challenge him. But either way, it's a huge break for Pedro Pascal, and I hope that his star continues to rise. I'm a big fan of his work. Then the next casting announcement is that Germany's Numan Acar, he was born in Turkey, but he emigrated to Germany in college actually to study, I think like engineering or architecture or something. Then he decided to become an actor. And so he's successful in Germany, and he recently came to Hollywood for Showtime's Homeland, but also Prison Break. And he's the latest actor of Middle Eastern descent to get a golden ticket out of the world of terrorism and war movies, or I guess prison shows, to get into Disney's live-action Aladdin. And he has been cast as quote-unquote head of the guards and Jafar's right-hand man. We all remember that guy from the first musical number, right? But still, Jafar was kind of a boss for always doing his own dirty work. I don't know how I feel about elevating that role. Maybe it's not elevated, but maybe Akar's just like, I'll take any role, I just want in this production. But as some of you said, he looks more like Jafar, and I would agree, than Marwan Kenzari. I'm going to give Marwan Kenzari the benefit of the doubt. I'm giving this whole production the benefit of the doubt, to be perfectly honest with you. But I will say that at first glance, Numan Acar seems like a better casting choice for Jafar himself. And speaking of Acar, he has another role coming up in a big, well, it has Hollywood talent. And it's called Horse Soldiers, and it stars Chris Hemsworth, Michael Shannon, and Michael Pena. That sounds pretty darn good. But it's about special forces in Afghanistan right after 9/11. Those types of films have been a tough sell in Hollywood. And again, I don't know how big Numan Akar's role is, and he's right back in terrorism and war movies there, right? So I'll be very curious to see, on a side note, if Aladdin can transition these actors of Middle Eastern descent permanently into mainstream Hollywood, or as I was referring to it yesterday on Movie Math, Hollywood proper, instead of, these very specific lanes, and this one being terrorism and war-related films. Or maybe this will just be a one-time deal. But if Aladdin's really successful, it would be nice to see them start to, this type of actor be in contention for colorblind casting. It would be fabulous. All right, so anyway, Poor Idris Elba's like, I'm struggling. I don't need any more competition. I feel bad for Idris Elba. I recently watched the Molly's Game trailer. I didn't get to react to it because I was traveling when it came out. And Idris Elba, speaking of Denzel Washington, his role there is so much like Denzel's in Philadelphia, although that was a very important milestone or rung in the ladder of Denzel's career. But I really like Idris Elba. I think he's so talented, and it makes me sad that he's struggling. But, you know, there are a lot of talented actors that never get a chance, so I guess he's doing better than them. All right, so anyway, of all ethnicities. All right, so anyway, the third casting announcement is that Deadpool wasn't a one-time deal for Ed Skrein. He's still in the game. Now, remember, he infamously walked away from Game of Thrones. They had to recast his role, right? They're like, you look different, Dario. They're like, it's a new actor. Because he got the Transporter reboot. And it's been a rocky road. You know, he did land Deadpool 2, the first Deadpool. I thought he was very good in it. But he's gotten himself another reboot after the Transporter, and this is the new Hellboy movie, The Blood Queen. I think this is a step in the right direction for that movie overall. As you might recall, when Milla Jovovich was cast as the Blood Queen, I felt that her B movie queen status would bring the movie down to being a B movie. And I think that Ed Skrein is a very interesting, dynamic actor, and Deadpool was such a big hit that hopefully this starts to pull it a little bit in the A direction. We'll see. He's playing a character called Major Ben Daimio, a rugged military member of the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense, who after a supernatural encounter, when he gets angry or is in pain, turns into a jaguar. I can totally see that with Skrein. He kind of looks cat-like already, but whoa! I think this is going to be a tough sell as not only an A movie, but to, you know, non-genre fans, right? I mean, I think they're already oversaturated with the main comic book movies. When you start having these secondary ones come in, it's tough. I mean, I love Neil Marshall. I'm really excited for David Harbour. He has an Emmy nomination right now for Stranger Things. I'm hoping they can push this. It's going to start shooting in September. Maybe we'll get some on-set photos, or at least a look at David Harbour's Hellboy look. But it's interesting, thinking of Ed Skrein playing this character who's basically the male version of Wonder Woman's villain, Cheetah, you have to wonder how Wonder Woman will be able to transition into some of her more comic booky elements, since they really stayed away from that in her movie. And then a lot of people... Well, when people complain about Wonder Woman, one of their chief complaints is the third act, which of course got the most comic booky. So I think that hopefully they'll be able to navigate her through those choppy waters. All right, now the viewer question of the day is fascinating, from MC Wyman. So MC Wyman says, "Hi Grace, I have a question. If this 17-day streaming thing takes effect, will the money used to pay for movies that go to streaming that way be counted in the movie's box office? If not, then how will they judge its success? And if so, how will it change how Hollywood sees the box office mathematically? Been a fan of your show for 3 years now, and I always find your perspective interesting and valuable. I'd love a response." And then lots of fun emojis with not only faces and hearts, but money emojis. Great question, MC Wyman. Absolutely fascinating. And as I tweeted this morning, Hollywood is narrowing in on a deal to do a 30-day later release for $30. I think that's too late. I think once you've waited 30 days, you might as well wait till it drops down to $20 to buy, $4 to rent, $4 to rent, or $1 on Redbox, as many of you have pointed out. I think 30 days, I think that just gets you past the breaking point. You know, you're like, 17 days is a little over 2 weeks. That's very exciting. You still feel like it's a fresh movie, and you'll pay more money because you feel like you're paying for something that's in theaters. After 30 days, it's essentially not in theaters anymore, considering how the cycle for most movies works. But anyway, fascinating question. We'll see what system they decide on and if it's a success. I don't think the $30 30-day later system will work, quite frankly. And we'll see if Hollywood adjusts or goes, well, this was a horrible idea, and walks away from it. So anyway, as for how they'll count the box office, well, Netflix, as you all know, hides their numbers, and I suspect for a reason, right? And then they decide when to renew things. Who knows what their business model is, or what factors they take into account. So it's very, you have to take Netflix's word for what's a success on their platform. And I guess you can judge it a little bit by what people are talking about. But anyway, perhaps what they could start out with is a ranking chart like on iTunes, but no specific stats. You can just see the most rented movie in that price range, the 17-day $50 price range, or the 30-day $30 price range. But then eventually, once the shift is made, someone's going to break the cycle and report actual revenue once they get a really big number. When they're able to say, it's just like video games. Sometimes video games will report how much money they bring in. So if someone can say, I put my movie on streaming, let's say let's do the 30-day. I don't think it's going to happen with the 30-day one, so it's tough. But let's just say let's do the 17-day one, because I think that's what's going to be successful if this does work. So you say, okay, I put, I don't know, let's say Logan Lucky, because it didn't do well at the box office, right, for theaters. So let's say I'm Bleecker Street, and I put Logan Lucky on streaming 17 days after its theatrical release for $50. And the thing pulls in, like, let's say $20 million, or maybe even $50 million, right? Let's give it a little bit of a better picture. You'd want to share that and make people be like, oh, wow, this is a hit, because you want that headline. Just like a box office headline makes more people go and buy a movie ticket to see that movie in theaters, they're going to want these numbers to get more people to pay for the streaming, and not only pay for the streaming, but for the higher price point. They're like, oh, you could be watching Logan Lucky right now, too, just like $50 million worth of people watched it. Buy it now. Don't wait for the price to drop to where you normally were maybe planning to watch it. So once somebody breaks that, as the first to do that, then everybody else is going to have to follow suit, because the public will go, if you aren't releasing your numbers, they must be pretty poor. So that's how I think the landscape would evolve. What it would mean for box office, quite frankly, you could be looking at a situation where, box office reporting becomes a lot more complicated. Oh boy! And also perhaps, it would be not box office, but just the earnings report. It would have to be an earnings report. It would be very interesting. Box office has become something that audiences are interested in because Hollywood uses it to help sell the movie. So I don't know if that would if it's no longer a useful tool to Hollywood, would they push it as hard as they currently do? It's very interesting question indeed. Like for instance, you don't have to know about songs for sale numbers specifically, but you do know where it is in the charts. So I do think charts is where we would start. It's a little bit like trailer views. Like now we've gotten to a point where particularly whatever the views are for the first 24 hours, that's reported because again, it's a selling point. It shows how popular the movie is. So when you get into the digital space, I think it's all about rankings, views. Maybe that's what they'll do instead of showing them. I mean, you could figure out the money though, right? If they told you how many views it had. But that's what I think. That's how I think it will evolve. But very interesting, and it also gives you some perspective of why we talk about box office at all, and why Hollywood is more than happy to let you the consumer be in on that discussion, which I think for a very long time was business to business. For those of you who don't know the terminology, there's different kinds of reporting, right? So there's B2B, which is business to business, which is a business publication, which is meant to only go to business, people in the business, right? And then there's B2C, which is business reporting meant for the consumer, which has been, like the smallest market for a long time. And then there's like C2C, where it's like something like, let's say, Entertainment Weekly, which is like news specifically structured for the consumer. And as I think consumers get savvier, they like the B2C option, right? Because they all flooded into B2B. And also, there's so much digital, there's so much revenue to be potentially made, and there's very little money in being a B2B outlet, right? So that's why you've seen, for instance, the Hollywood Reporter evolve so much into B2C that they've almost become C2C. So it's interesting. It's very, very interesting. All right, write your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for tuning in. And you can check out, write down not only what you think of today's top 3 stories and MC Wyman's viewer question, but of course anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions that you might have. All right, now, thanks for watching, and you can check out some more videos right now.